Hello, everyone. Welcome to this BestNotes webinar. BestNotes documentation seems very daunting at first because there's a whole lot of parts to it. I'm hoping today we can reduce any anxiety associated with it by kind of running through everything that we can do, mention a couple things that we can't, hopefully give everyone some more confidence in what they are able to do today. We're going to be covering several things. First, we're going to cover a little bit of tips and tricks, some cautions and caveats. We'll be talking about data forms. We'll be talking a little bit about the MedClinical. We'll be spending a lot of time on templates and auto notes. We're going to spend some time on group notes, and we'll talk a little bit about signing documents, file uploads and downloads, and then we're also going to talk about profiles. If you don't see everything that I have on my screen as we're going through this, that is all right. I'm going to give you the list of everything or all the permissions needed to be able to do what I am doing. But not everyone necessarily needs every permission to do everything, so individual system administrators can make that judgment call. But to do everything I will be doing today, the permissions we need are contacts, manage auto notes, manage templates, documents, files, set up contact pins, reset contact pins, create folders, delete files, upload files, create assessments, view assessments, diagnose, create group notes, and group notes admin. There are a couple items that we will not be covering in this webinar that are tangentially related to documentation. Primarily, we're not going to be talking about the mobile app, BestNotes portal, and we're not going to talk much about the custom treatment plan library. But if you have any interest in those items, feel free to give us a call or an email, and we'd be happy to help you with those as well. Before we get started, I do want to talk a little bit about the profile. We'll talk about more of it later. For those of you who know what the profile is, this might be a little redundant, but for everyone else, it's a relatively new feature. We've been pushing it fairly heavily for a couple months now. But it's in essence a ready-to-use set of clinical documentation. We actually have two different sets of clinical documentation for addiction treatment and behavioral health. We're going to cover a lot of fancy features that we can do here in BestNotes. The profile has most of those already built in, and it's been designed with our clinical team, our advisory board, to be about as audit-proof as possible. If we go through all of this and we decide, you know what, I can understand better what the documentation is about, but I want to worry about it even less, then we can certainly do a demo of the profile for you. All right, so before we start with the actual documentation, there are a few things that we should be aware of. The text entry areas in BestNotes are coded in a very basic code format. There are several benefits to that. I call them the 3 S's, primarily speed, security, and storage. You don't need to have a strong internet connection to be making the notes. You don't need to worry about it being hacked because there's no backdoor to the code being two-dimensional. You can literally have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of notes before anything remotely starts getting bogged down. There are, however, a couple downsides to this as well, primarily special characters and copying and pasting. I can only imagine there are several of you nodding in somber agreement when I say copying and pasting. The reason behind that is a little multiple-fold, but let me give you an example. Here I have a Word document, and there's 2 things to be aware of. One, we have marks, quotation marks here with smart quotes. When you paste that into BestNotes, or if you ever see any weird gobbledygook looking like this guy on top, that is because they're using a special character, which is string of information pointing a text editor to a certain special character. BestNotes sees that string of information but doesn't always associate that with the curly quotes or curly apostrophe. The other problem is anything that we copy and paste from has a lot of data beyond the text that we see. There's, left align this, bold that, use this font size, use that font if possible, put this in a frame. All of this information is connected with the copy procedure. BestNotes will see all that information and usually won't know what to do with it. If you've ever had a locked treatment plan, you know what I'm talking about. Historically, and still now, the way around that has been to copy and paste directly into our little BestNotes notepad. That itself will strip away all of the text formatting, and you're able to then copy from here and paste it somewhere else. That's still a valid method, but I am happy to report that for everyone that is updated to the newest version of BestNotes, you can tell by looking at your icon here on the top. If it's a red B in front of a white background, you're on our updated version. If it's a red B in front of a clock, you're still running our legacy version. But if you update to it, which I'd recommend since we're sunsetting the old one at the end of March, we'll find that anything we copy and paste will automatically strip all the formatting out. So that can help us from locking all sorts of problems up. It will also prevent us from needing to do that extra step through the notepad. So if you update, copying and pasting will automatically strip away that formatting code. There is one other thing that we're going to mention that is a downside to the basic text entry fundamental coding. But before we get to that, let's talk about data forms. In my personal opinion, data forms are criminally underused. What makes them magical is that they can push to pretty much anywhere in BestNotes, and they can all be reported on. Data form fields are each discrete data points that can be pulled in separately and reported on individually or as an aggregate. If we go to settings and then data forms, we can see how we would create one. We're going to spend some time on this because this is also going to translate to a lot of what we can do with the MedClinical. But we're going to create a new form. I'm going to call it test form, and we're going to see how it looks out. You can see that I've been practicing with my pre-populated answers. But here we have our test form, and we're just going to run through what we can do here. So my first question is going to be hair color. It's a fairly basic question, and barring dyes, there's only so many options of hair color, so I'm going to use a select box. The benefit of using a select box as opposed to an open text box is it keeps the data consistent. If you're running a report or pulling information through to a template from a data form and someone spells blonde differently than someone else in a text box, that's going to cause some data disparity. So a select box helps remove that problem. So we're going to go with, there's black hair, there's blonde hair. We notice I'm putting in an asterisk. That's how the select box knows what is a different item, is via the asterisk. Brunette and redhead and good old gray mane, white hair. All right, we're going to add that, and there's two numbers I want us to be aware of. One is our order number. By changing the order number, we can change the order, who guessed it, of the items in the data field. So if my next question, which is going to be favorite food, if I wanted that on top, I would just change this to 1 and hair color to 2, and we could adjust it that way. The other number we should be aware of is this ID number over on the right. That is the number that associates this particular data with a discrete data point. That is how we can pull items into a treatment plan, an assessment, a template, even some client demographic sections. That data ID, that field ID, is what we need to be able to do that. So back to favorite food. That's a little bit more open-ended than hair color. So I'm going to leave that as a text box because I don't want to just list 3 or 4 favorite foods people can choose. We can choose the size of the text box, and we'll see how that looks in a moment when we look at this live on the client. However, we found 24 is often the best default size, so that's why it's set there automatically. You can tweak it as you will, but I'm going to leave it at 24. Each time I add a field, it does ask me to save it. It does save as we go along. This next question is going to be a little bit more difficult. Favorite genre of music? Why? Now, that is not something that can be answered in one sentence very often, so I want that to be a multi-line text box. We'll see how that looks in a moment. There's also the ability to put in a date which is particularly beneficial for reporting purposes, not usually that important for pushing through. If you're pushing through the data, you can just use a text box as well, but might as well keep it consistent with the date. And then we're going to have an entirely new section. Have you ever? We'll change this to a section header to create some visual distinctness. And we'll say been in an airplane. That's a very binary choice. It's either yes or no. I certainly could do a select box with yes and no, but in this case, I think a checkbox would suit my purposes even better. And then we'll have had a pet ? That will also be a checkbox, and we will save this. Now let's go to a client. Right now, let's go to Gabio test person. If we go to our Forms tab, we will notice that the form is not currently there. Back in the data form settings, we do have the ability over here on the right to set a particular form to automatically apply to a certain contact type that will apply to every client in this case going forward. Every created client in this database will have that form automatically show up, but it does not retrodate. So in the case of Gabio test person, if we go to forms, I just need to click this little icon with the pencil and the paper. Then I will click this drop down. We'll go to test form, hit add, and boom, here we go. This is how it will look. This is how the drop down looks. This is the text box. Let's do a little autobiographical here. Might as well. I have a lot of favorite foods, but we're going to say pizza because it's safe. A favorite genre of music and why gets a little complicated for me, and we'll see why I have a multi-line text box. I also, if you're using the updated version of BestNotes, on the bottom corner here, I have a little click and drag box to change the visuality and the size therein. So we can make that look a little more congruent. My birth date, we need to notice that it has to be in this particular format for it to pull through properly. And then, yes, I've been in an airplane and had a pet. That's how our data forms work. Again, every single item in here can be pulled forward to an assessment. We can have it show up here on the client's page. We can pull it into almost anywhere, as well as report on it. In the report builder, we can see that every form we've created has a discrete reportable data point. So what does that have to do with assessments? Well, unlike most items in BestNotes, assessments are something that only we can do. On your end, I am hoping that we'll feel more confident in making changes to templates, making changes to data forms, creating new ones, playing with auto notes, and all that by the end of this session. That said, med-clinical changes need to be done on our end. However, the items that we can have in here are pretty much identical to what we can have in a data form with a couple additions. So right now we're looking at our Jonathan Randolph Rayuel assessment. That's J.R. Tolkien, in case we're interested. This is a little section from The Hobbit when the orcs are chasing the dwarves, and there's a little song they sing. But again, we have a multi-line text box. We can have regular text boxes of varying sizes. We also, as we see here, can have data automatically pull in from the assessment itself. So if we want a default value, that's possible. Unlike data forms, we have a radio button option that can help with visuality if you want to see all the options but select only one. Again, multi-line text box. And we also have the ability in data forms to make something dependent. So as I click this check me box, we see that there are some more items that I can select. And of course, we can add digital signatures as necessary. John Doe, and hey, let's add me here. And then that can be signed. It is important to know, however, that the med-clinical documents are living documents. Both the assessments and the treatment plans are alive. They're never really finished. You can keep going in and you can edit them and you can change things as long as your database exists. So if you need to send something to a parole officer or send it to court, or just want to have a, hey, this is what things looked like on this date, and send it to a parent on the portal or whatever, that is when we need to publish a snapshot. Publishing a snapshot is exactly what it sounds like. You're taking a picture of this document at this point in time and putting it on the activity log. If at any point you're wondering why something is not on the activity log, oftentimes it is because we have not published a snapshot. Treatment plans function pretty similarly to the assessments. Again, only we can make those changes. There is a little bit less variety of visual format we can do. We also can't do radio buttons, but otherwise we can build in more or less whatever you need there. We also, and we're not going to cover these very much, but we can put in medications and allergies in the Med Clinical tab. That can pull into all of our documentation as well. We can yank that into a template or into an assessment, so on and so forth. Another thing to keep in mind is that the assessments can pull into the treatment plans. Data forms can push into either. Another thing to be aware of is the diagnosis widget is an important part of our documentation in the assessments and treatment plans. Its functionality is fairly simple. You just click the add diagnosis, you pick your code set. By default, you have ICD-10. If you give yourself, or someone gives you the permission for DSM-5 diagnoses, you can have that as well in the drop-down. There is a $4 charge a month per user for that goes straight to the APA, so just be aware of that. If I know what code I'm looking for, I can type it in. Otherwise, I can select something, and I can go through and put in some information. But either way, I'll save it, and there it is. Thing to note is that this is the initial diagnosis, and there is a difference. Notice I can click and drag if I had two items. There is a difference between the initial diagnosis and the master diagnosis. The initial diagnosis can be done by the nurse, saying it looks like they have this. Maybe it's self-reported by the client, but it's not necessarily what you're sending to insurance. It's not necessarily what the doctor has said, yep, that's what's going on. That would need to be put on the master treatment plan in the master diagnosis. We can add a diagnosis directly from the master treatment plan. It's the same general pattern. We also can hit this little arrow and pull forward the information from the initial diagnosis. We do have a lot of pre-built objectives, goals, problems, interventions that are associated with a lot of these diagnoses. We also have some unassociated ones. You can see that these kind of don't seem to match with unspecified dementia. That's more or less happening because there's nothing associated with the unspecified dementia. So that value is 0. The search engine is looking for 0, and here are goals that also have a value of 0 because they're not attached to any diagnosis either. But a lot of our diagnoses will have something created with our diagnostic team with pre-built things. You also have the ability to make any changes or additions or subtractions or edits in the treatment plan library section of your settings. We're not going to be talking about that today, but we're able to very customize your diagnosis section as you need as well. We're going to move on now to templates. Now, templates is usually what we mean when we say notes. That's fairly generic, but usually when we say notes, we're talking about template notes. There's a couple things we should be aware of with them. First, let's look at a progress note, and in a little bit we're going to be creating one. But we can see this progress note has a couple different ingredients, as it were. First off, it's pulling in a lot of information automatically. Timothy here does not have a therapist set, so that's why that's not pulling in. But everything's kind of just popped up the way it is there. We have some blank text boxes over here, blah, blah. And we have auto notes over here on the right. Auto notes are notes that write themselves. Instead of having to type in an entire mental status assessment, I can talk with the client choose some items, and boom, I can put something in data or plan as needed. I can save the note. What would have taken maybe half an hour if you're slow, but would have taken a good chunk of time to create manually, we've been able to finish in 30 seconds. So that's really why we try to make the notes the best they can be, thus BestNotes. Now you know. We do notice a couple other things. One, we do have these text boxes that we can type into. However, you're not restricted to those. I can click anywhere that I want and type something in. We can also do some basic formatting using these items on top. Then we have the different options of saving and closing. I mentioned there was going to be one more caveat, one more downside of the basic text entry base coding that we have. That one is the Windows close buttons on Notes, or the Mac close buttons if that is what you're using. We need to get out of the habit of using those, especially group notes, but also template notes. In essence, what happens is when you click that, it will close it on your computer, but the cloud server that the data is held on doesn't know that you've closed it. Eventually, someone else will want to open that note and will say that you're looking at it, even though it's been weeks. And that can be easily fixed, but it's also a bit of a pain. So if we get in the habit of hitting save and close, or save, sign, unlock, we can save ourselves some headache. Notice that we can again add multiple people here to sign the note. Anything that you create from your account that you say you're going to lock, you finalize the note and it's good, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to lock this? And then it can't be edited and so on and so forth. We should be aware that this will automatically apply your digital signature. If it's your note that you're creating that you need to sign while logged into your account, we assume you know what you are doing. For anyone else, such as Joe Regular, another employee at this BestNotes webinar database, he will find the document to review and sign in his For Review tab, and we'll get to how Timothy signs it in a moment. A couple other magic tricks that a lot of people don't know about are found here on the sidebar. By default, we're looking at the auto notes. Let's find a better example. Let's go to John Doe. Clip his progress note. He has a couple in his history. But the history tab, I can click on that and I can open up progress notes that were created previously. This can be very helpful. We can find, hey, this is more or less the same information. I can pull it over directly just by clicking on it. It's a way to both check what has been done, both by you and other providers, as well as making your notes even faster and automatic as it can reasonably be. We also have the ability to jump to data forms here. That way, if you have a data form pushing into a template note, you do not need to go back out to the Forms tab. You can just do that straight in the note itself. And then the notepad for, again, copying and pasting and stripping the formatting code. Again, if you're on our newer version of BestNotes, that won't be an issue. All right, so let's see what this looks like on the back end, how we get it to pull in that stuff magically. But before we get that, I'm going to show you a documenter's best friend. If you go to help.bestnotes.com, type in the word special. One of the first items is going to be all special fields. And this is where a lot of the magic happens. If we really want to maximize and make our best notes, special fields and auto notes are going to be the way to go. There's all sorts of information we can pull in automatically. If I don't want to type out the email every time, if I don't want to put in his parents' information every time, that's all a special field that I can pull in here. We can see that there's different fields that work in different types of documents. We have a med-clinical assessment, we have the med-clinical treatment, we have template notes, auto notes, and group notes. And if you're ever wondering if there's an item that we can put in here, I'll just go ahead and open up a search bar and let's see, date. All right, so we can put in contact date, start date. I can kind of filter it that way and find the associated special field. You might want to bookmark this page. It is a great resource. So as we go to our settings and then templates, let's go ahead and open up that progress note. And we can see that we have a lot of special fields in here already. This is what was pulling in that information directly. We also have a special field for associated auto notes that we have listed over here, and then just some blanks for making those text boxes that we saw earlier. So how would we, instead of just editing what we have here, how would we make one from scratch? It's pretty simple. Let's do that right now. We're going to say, I'm going to imagine anyway, that this facility, we are having regular camping excursions. Maybe this is a youth treatment facility, I'm not sure. You can see that I have been playing with this by the pre-populated options. We have, if you've ever used Microsoft Word or Mac Text Edit or pretty much anything, this will look pretty familiar. We're just entering text with some basic formatting options. So we'll want it to look nice, so we'll make this bolded, camping note, cool. I have to line this, name, well, how about start date? Why not? And that'll be enough for now. I know what the special fields are, but again, feel free to look it up in that web page. But we're going to have XF name. Oh, I don't want that bolded. XF name, first name, and then last name will populate automatically. The start date is going to be the XDOA. We also have the ability to add a formatting line just by a single click, and adding tables. Now, adding tables is fairly simple, but it does require a little bit of Shutter math. Basically, the table's numbers, the column widths, need to add up to 100. So in this case, it's showing an example of 25, 25, 25, and 25. That will give us 4 equal lines. But in this case, I don't want just a table to fill in information. I want it to function kind of like a checkbox. Before we do that, let's add some signatures. And we'll put in a table right here. But if I want to be a checkbox, we can do something closer to 5, 20, 5, 20, 5, and 20. That may not equal exactly 100, but we'll notice that it will approximate it. We can add more rows easily enough, just right here, but adding more columns needs the table to be rebuilt. So this is going to be our checklist. We need to make sure we remember to bring a tent, and clean clothes, and then maybe an umbrella, but that is optional. You can do even more with auto notes. So we're going to save and close this. We're going to get back to it in a bit. Let's look at auto notes. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. When I first started with BestNotes, auto notes looked really intimidating. They kind of scared me. The good news is they really don't need to. They're really not that difficult. Once I actually started doing them, turns out they're pretty simple. There are 3 sections to an auto note that we need to be aware of. There is the note section, there is the variables, and there is the text. Every auto note is made out of those three options. And it can be quite complex. Let's pull up an auto note that already exists. I think the health questionnaire is a good example. So it can be fairly complex. It can be fairly long. We can have an auto note do a lot of heavy lifting. It depends on the particular note we are creating. In this case, we're going to create a new note because if we're going camping, we want to bring a lunch. Right, I think so. Again, the same basic formatting options are here. But instead of having people free type, I want to make this note fast. Let's make an auto note. So what will we ask here? Well, we'll probably want to ask what kind of sandwich they want. We'll also probably want to ask, maybe what kind of chips they want. You can see I've been doing this before. And maybe a couple other things. Note that I can put these in any order I want. I can put in the variable titles first. I can put in the note first. I can put in the text information first. Whatever works best for you. But either way, the sandwich is variable 1. And the chips are variable 2. We can see the names here. And then in this section, we want to put in the options. And then we will have maybe drink, who knew? For sandwiches, we have a PB&J. We have maybe a deli with ham or a deli with turkey. And let's say a tuna sandwich. For chips, we have regular, barbecue, and nacho cheese. Drinks we can have, what would be good? Maybe milk, water, and apple juice. That seems reasonable to me. So I put in the V3, don't have it up here yet. Again, it doesn't matter what order I put this in as long as it all gets in there. We can also put in special fields, most special fields, into auto notes. Again, that this help page can tell us whether or not something can be in an auto note or not. But most special fields will work in there. So you know what? If we're making lunches, I also want to see what people's allergies are. So I'm just going to pull that information straight in from the MedClinical tab if I've been putting it in there, or I can pull it from a data form if that's where I've been keeping the information. We're going to have preferences in here. That's not something that we can choose. So this is more generic. It's not something that I want them to choose from a list. So that's going to be a text field, and that's all that T's stand for, is text for the auto note. So this one is fairly basic, but I think we can probably get the gist. A couple things to be aware of. We have these items up here. If I want people to, or if I want the selected items to show up as a bulleted or as a numbered list, I would select those checkboxes. And this little checkbox here over to the text labels creates or forces it to be a calendar drop down if you need to pull in dates. All right, so we have this. Each auto note needs to belong to an auto note collection. They're often a 1-to-1 ratio, but not necessarily. So we're going to create a new collection by hitting the new collection button. And hey, lunch. This is good. We're going to save as new. Let's see how we put that into that template we've just created. We'll pull up the camping note. And I'll just choose where I want the lunch auto note to be. Again, I can put in the lunch auto note, but unless I attach it directly to the template, it's not going to do much of anything. Luckily, that's very easy. Just click lunch, add to list. Hey, there we are. Let's go ahead and save and close this and see how it looks. Pull up our camping note. And we have Timothy Pretend here. It's pulled in some information automatically. We can say whether or not he has these items. Then you can click lunch over here. He doesn't have any allergies listed, so there's nothing listed under there, but that's pulling the allergy information in. He's going to have a PB&J with barbecue chips and an apple juice. Why not? And there we go. I made a good chunk of the note with just a couple clicks of the mouse. Again, we can have information pull all the way through BestNotes. We can put some information into a data form that pulls into an assessment, that pulls into a treatment plan, which pulls into these template notes. We really want to make this as easy and painless as possible. And although there is perhaps a lot of thought that goes into it and a bit of effort, all of this can be done without too much difficulty, as long as we understand the components. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save and lock this particular note. I also want Timothy to sign it. Now, for me to sign it, again, I just hit save and close. If the other people in my facility need to sign it, it goes in their For Review tab. For a client to sign it, there's two ways to do it. It can be done via the portal, but today we're going to be talking about their PIN signatures. If you have the right permissions, on the top of the client's page, we have this little E with a pin, or a pen by it. If I click that, it locks me out of BestNotes because at this point I'm turning my computer around to say, hey, Timmy, please put in a PIN. I shouldn't have to say this, but because it's come up before, do not put in the PIN for them. That would be a problem. It's something only they should know. It attaches their digital signature. But since Timmy's not real, I'm going to put it in for him. Then I have two options. I can click on an item that I want Timmy to sign by the button here on the right. Or we have that same E with a pen item up here on the top with a number by it. I can click on that to have him sign everything all at once. He'll put in his PIN. Again, it locked it so that he doesn't necessarily see his chart. Go through this. And there we go. These digital PINs are accepted in all 50 states. Bill Clinton actually signed that into law years ago. So if you have anyone with security concerns, it's actually more safe than physical signatures because they can't be forged. All right, let's look at one last type of template, and that is the group note. The group note templates are found in the same location as the regular templates. I'll just scroll down until I get to active group. Now we notice that there's two different colors here. We have a black active group and a red active group. The difference between that is the underlying code. The red ones are what we call reportable group notes. They have some extra functionality. They can have drop downs. They can pull into reports, the data fields in there, but they're also something that have to be edited by BestNotes. That's not something you can do on your end. On the other hand, all the other kinds of group notes, you certainly can. You can create your own. You can edit the ones that are there. We can have all sorts of fun. They can be fairly complicated, as in the case of this one. The only thing that makes this different from a regular template, the only way that this is known as a group note is this little field right here. Group participants equals, and then we have the little close bracket down on the bottom over here. But it's that group participant section that turns it into a group note. I do tend to recommend against tables in group notes. It's certainly possible. But if you have a table, especially if you're putting it in the group participant area, it will often become a very bloated document and start causing some trouble. So be careful with that, but it's certainly a possibility. We can be pretty complex like that one, or we can have a fairly simple group note. The sky in your imagination is largely the limit. Another thing to be aware of, we go to the Group Notes tab, we go to the Admin section. We have more than one group that uses the same group note, the same template. The process and the shift groups, for example, both are using the same group note. It is not necessary to make a new template for every group you have. If your morning counseling group is pretty much the same thing as your afternoon counseling group, you can just go ahead and create different groups using the same underlying template. We can create a group note from the calendar, the same with the other types of documents as well, but I'm going to create it from the Group Notes tab. We'll hit New Session, and there's a couple magic things about group notes. We'll add a couple items here, Timothy Pretend and John Doe. The magic of group notes is that you can create one note for multiple people while still keeping everything HIPAA compliant. In essence, everything in this session section is going to appear on everyone's chart. Everything under Gabby's section here will only show up on Gabby's chart. Here will only show up on Timothy's, and here will only show up on John. So instead of having 3 or 4 or however many people you have in your group, and different notes open at the same time, we can just have one note and edit it as we need and go along. A couple things to be extra careful of. I mentioned the Windows X. That's bad in template notes. It is really bad in group notes. Many of you, I'm sure, have run into a situation where it says, hey, Associate Bob is looking at this note. You go to Bob, he says, I haven't seen it in weeks. That's because he hit the Windows or Mac close button as opposed to R, save, and close cancel buttons. Let's go ahead and just put something real quick here so we can see a couple things, blah, blah, and blah. We will save and lock it. I'm required to sign it. I'll hit OK. And then if I go to a client's chart, look at the group note, I just see John and the session summary as well as my signature. Now, something that we can do with notes is if you have the right permissions, we can unlock notes by hitting this little lock over here. That's potentially problematic because it will remove all signatures. It will make the note editable again, but all signatures applied to it will be gone and they will need to be re-signed. If there's been enough time elapsed, that can occasionally cause compliance problems, so just be aware of that. If we want to avoid that problem, we can just hit append. This is functionally just adding a sticky note to the bottom of the page if we were still doing paper, and is often sufficient. However, we must be very careful if we're going to append something to a group note, because as it says here, an append to a group note will appear on the individual note for all group participants. So if I just want to add something for John, I need to be careful because the append will put that data on everyone's chart in the group note. In this case, to find the group note that we want to edit or look at or reform, whatever, we'll click the History tab. I believe that was the Shift note. I can find it here under History. And then I have permission to unlock it. We can do that. It's no longer in the history because it's no longer a completed note. It is back in the live sessions. I can go back in here and do as I need. The last thing we want to cover as far as functionality is something I'm sure a lot of you know, but just to make sure we're thorough, is the Files tab. BestNotes can do all sorts of notes. It can do almost anything your heart desires, but you know what? Sometimes someone's written something handwritten that you want to upload. Maybe there's a particular document that's been emailed to you. Maybe there's just a nice picture that a kid wrote and they want to send to their parents. That's all great. We can upload that through the Files tab. BestNotes will hold your files. It doesn't really care which ones. It's fairly file agnostic. However, some file types will not open through BestNotes. They'll need to be downloaded before they can be accessed. We do have the hard and fast rule. Maximum file size is 5 megabytes. That's actually set by our server, not by BestNotes itself. There's not much we can do about that. The good news is that 5 megabytes is going to be enough for almost everything you're going to run across. The times when we run into trouble or if we have long audio, or if we're trying to put video in there, or ginormous PDFs that are created from scanning in with a scanner or a scanner printer. The way around this is usually just to lower the scan settings on your scanner or printer. If it's not scanning fine art, you're probably fine taking a step or two down in the dots per inch resolution, and that will take your 20 megabyte document usually down to 3 or 4. And if that doesn't work, you can upload 5 pages at a time, do 1 through 5, and then 5 through 10, and so on and so forth, if you do have a ginormous document that needs to be up there. We do have, in a similar manner, this Documents tab. The Documents tab functions the same way as the Files tab, but we need to understand that this is not for PHI. The Documents tab is accessible by anyone in your database that has the permission. This is more for, safety documents or training documents or anything that your company wants to keep here. The same 5 megabyte rule applies. And maybe someday that will change, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it being anytime soon, unfortunately. All right, so the last thing I want to cover is profiles. We talked a bit about that at the beginning, but I kind of want to reemphasize them here. Profiles are potentially the saving grace for a lot of companies. We have over 200 companies using them so far. More are signing up regularly. I encourage you to look into it. We have 2 different profiles. We have the behavioral health profile, and we have the addiction treatment profile. And the magic of them is that they already have most of what we talked about built in. We can have a client fill out some information. This is the behavioral health profile I'm looking at right now. We can have them put in some information in the intake or the pre-screen. That will pull straight into all these other areas. That information is going to pull through into the treatment plans, which will pull through into our mini notes. On top of that, these are constantly watched by our auditing team, by our profile team, and by our clinical team, as well as clinical partners, to be in compliance with the common state regulations, United Health level of care guidelines, as well as the standards recommended by the Joint Commission and CARF. If we want to breathe easy at night, although we can do a whole lot of customization for you or help you do it yourself, sometimes we want to have the simplest solution that works. The profile is often the way to go. For your information, we can add things to your profile if you decide to sign up. So if we don't quite have all the questions you want in the comprehensive diagnostic assessment, that's fine. We can still add more for you. If you're at all interested in this, you can go ahead and contact us. We'd be happy to give you a demo. On top of that, for any other questions or concerns or thoughts or clarifications you need, you can feel free, let me get this over to you visibly, to contact us at either team@bestnotes.com or team+PCT@bestnotes.com for profile questions. On top of that, let's have some time for questions and answers now. How can we access the BHP profile? All right, so we have one question. How can we answer the BH profile that is showing now? That's a great question. You'll probably want to sign up for a demo. We can send you a PDF or a set of PDFs with all the documentation therein. It does not show you all the ways in the background that it connects from one document to the other. So I do tend to recommend a demo. But yeah, we'd be happy to send you whatever you need or to set up a training or a demo with you. All right, looks like we have a question. Is there a way to add a client ID number automatically when they are entered as a new client? That is a great question. It's not directly documentation related. However, that is information we often want to pull into a document. So sure, whenever you create a new client, Let's go back to my webinar one so I don't. Whenever you create a new client, it automatically creates what's called a CID. That is automatically generated upon creation of a client and is unique for each client. We can have that pull into, again, pretty much anything you want it to. We also have the capability, if you have your own categorization system, to use the ID field if you don't want to use ours. How do you add more documents folders is another question. That is a great question. If you have the right permissions to do so, in the Files tab or the Documents tab, they'll both have a similar Documents tab. It's up here on the top, Add Folder. On the Client's Files tab, it'll be the little folder with a, I don't know, is that an explosion, a star, whatever. And it will let us create a folder here. One thing to be aware of is once we start creating folders, documents can be clicked and dragged very easily. Oftentimes we'll get a phone call about, hey, this document just disappeared. Oftentimes it's simply because it was accidentally clicked and dragged into a folder. So that's often the first place you'll want to look. Another question we have is, would it make sense for us to upload our internal BestNotes training documents for folks to have easy access? I think that would make sense. That's up to you and your facility. But yes, that is one of the primary reasons the Documents tab is for there. That way they don't need to go digging or searching elsewhere. It's all right there. We haven't really talked about restrictions today, but you can restrict items in the Documents and Files tab just as you can restrict other types of notes. If we forget, this is another question, if we forget some of the coding, when to use the curly brackets versus the straight brackets, etc., is there a quick way to access that info? Cheat sheet. Yes. Again, we have the all special fields option, which will tell you specifically what we're looking for. A general rule of thumb is things pulling from the client's chart are going to be in curlies, and things for signatures and notes are generally going to be in straight brackets. But if this is a little overwhelming, and again, you don't need to memorize it by any means, we do have frequently used special fields page on the help document that will kind of give you an example. All right, we have a question. Can you have the data forms on your website so potential clients can fill information out before they come in for an assessment? Yes and no. We can have a application for the client to fill out. We do have it built so that certain items can push directly into a data form. However, most of that will pull into an assessment. It was kind of built that way. So for keeping data forms, most of that's not going to pull in automatically, unfortunately. We have a question, is there any way to have files that are uploaded into client charts open automatically without having to download to the computer? It depends on the file type. We have been working on this. If you update to our newest version of BestNotes, it has the most compatibility. If it's a picture file or a PDF, yes, usually it will. There are certain exceptions if the PDF is encoded in different ways, but most picture files and PDFs are going to open automatically. If you have some, like a Word document, it may or may not. It depends on like the handlers of your program on your computer. Also, if you have things like video or something, usually you'll need to download that before that will open. Again, it depends on the file type. So do data forms need to be manually entered? There's no way to auto-populate. Unfortunately, that is correct. The data forms themselves are kind of the lowest rung on the ladder. They can push into anywhere, but they can't really pull from much of anywhere. So you can use that to build up to anything, but unfortunately, you can't really have anything pushed down to them. Here's a good question. Is there a link where we can view the new version of BestNotes and how it's going to change or improve? We do send out an email to system administrators with kind of some information on occasion, but really, usually the best way to find out how things are changing and updating is coming here on the login page to the What's New tab and interested in what we're working on now will lead you to some things that are currently being developed. Is there a way to add many data forms all at once, or do they need to be added one at a time? They need to be built deliberately, so it's done one at a time, unfortunately. And we have a question, can you pull attendance reports from group notes? That's a fantastic question. That goes back to what I talked a bit about reportable group notes. The ones that were in red that can't be edited on your side but have to be edited by BestNotes. Those can have anything from them reported on in our report builders, so attendance can be one of those items, yes. We have a question here. Is there any way to get forms to attach to an assessment or case management assessment? If what you're talking to is have a form automatically apply when you open one assessment, have another like note just automatically poof open, unfortunately not. In theory, we could have both notes attached to a calendar appointment. So when you open the calendar appointment and start that up, it will pull multiple files open for you to finish, but we don't have really an automated way to have a note attach itself to another note. We've looked into things like that, and we found that the possibility for catastrophic user error outweighs the potential benefits. Thank you very much for coming. I hope that this was beneficial. You all have a fantastic day.